Hello there and welcome back to Four Tims in a Podcast. You join us on the evening of the 28th of July. We are less than a week until the season starts as Celtic start their title defence at home to St Mirren. We were planning coming on and doing a full season preview and previewing that game in there, but I think the last sort of week or so there's been real anger swirling in the support regarding the state of the transfer window so far. As I say, we're less than a week to go until the season starts proper, and Celtic have spent next to nothing. In fact, they've made a healthy profit in this transfer window with the likes of Jeremy Frimpong money coming in and Nicholas Kuhn been sold as well, of course. So as we hear, Celtic have brought in the likes of Shin Yamada, Benjamin Nygren, Kieran Tierney, Ross Doohan, Callum Osmond and Nagato and Amura. But a few of them are free transfers and the other two were sort of nominal. And the other way, we've received about close to £20 million. I think a lot of people of a sort of sound mind believe that the squad's much weaker than it was this point last year and maybe not prepared for a potential, well, not a potential, we've got a Champions League qualifier in a few weeks, plus a potential serious title challenge this year if Rangers or whoever else gets their shit together. It looks like they are splashing the cash a bit, unlike us. So as I say, there's been a lot of discontent in the support, so I think this episode we're just going to focus on that and talk about how we're feeling. I think we've been relatively calm up until now, but the last sort of week or so has sort of saw a real spike in people getting annoyed, us included. Our group chat's been quite active about it as well, so we'll just thought we'll get some of that out in the open. So it's myself, Darren, here, and delighted to be joined by full complement tonight. So it's Tony, Danny and Andy with me. So Tony, I'll come at you. As I say, I think we had been relatively calm, probably because at the start of this window, things did seem to be happening quite quickly. We obviously had Kieran Tierney who had agreed to come, Ross Doohan followed, and then the few other signs like Callum Osmond and Amura sort of appeared quite relatively quickly towards the end of June. But the last few weeks there's been, apart from Shin Yamada and eventually Benjamin Nygren, there's been next to nothing, and every rumour that seems to come out about Celtic, it's how we appear to be lowballing teams and getting laughed out of boardrooms when we're submitting bids that just aren't anywhere up to what players are looking for. So how are you feeling? As I say, we're less than a week until the season starts proper. How are you feeling the squad's looking and this transfer window's been as a whole?
It's been another failure so far. I'm disappointed, I'm pissed off, but it feels all a bit familiar. It's very on board for the Celtic board and whoever obviously does the recruitment with them. I mean, just as we've got rid of so many players, and I'm not saying we should have kept any of them, it's probably for the best, but I'd actually have taken notes, which is when you know I'm annoyed. I just want to go through the 2023 summer window. Kwon, Tilio, Lagerbielke, Naroki, Holm, Palmer, Phillips and Yang. Now, I would argue that every one of them was a failure. People can debate me on Yang, but he's not done enough yet. So for me, I think at the time it was Peter Lawwell's son that was the head of recruitment. Whoever employed him should have been sacked for that window alone and the failures since. So for me, we've still got the same people that are making the same mistakes when it comes to transfer windows. And then the excuse is going to be, well, still got a month left. Well, Como had a lot of time left. Didn't stop them coming and getting a main winger and paying €80 million for him. So they didn't use the excuse that there's plenty of time left, and neither did we. We never says, well, we want to wait and see. We just sold them right away. So I don't buy any of the excuses. I think any fan that does is shortchanging themselves, to be honest. Constantly, this board are taking more and more away for the fans in terms of getting a free qualifiers gone. Even a pre-season friendly, they're charging £25 to watch us in a pre-season friendly, which I thought was just shambolic, really terrible stuff. The season tickets continue to rise, but yet they won't increase the wage structure, they won't change it to allow for a better calibre of player to come in. I find it absolutely astounding, the support the fans give Celtic. I mean, boot the fans, Celtic are nothing. We're the biggest stakeholders in the club. Your man, Michael Nicholson, I mean, he is a nothing. I don't know a thing about him. I don't know his vision for the club. He never speaks, he never communicates to the biggest stakeholders. Nothing from him, nothing at all. So stuff like that, I just found it's just really poor. And then you look at Lawwell, I've said before, nobody knows how much influence he has, but he should never have been brought back, because he's still the kind of bogeyman. Nobody talks about Nicholson. They just say, oh, Lawwell. He just gets the blame because he was the CEO for so long. So him being there takes away a lot of kind of stick for Nicholson. But let's take the club at their word. Nicholson is the CEO and is fully operating as that. He should be getting a hell of a lot of stick because since he's come in, apart from a couple of windows underhand, it's been very, very underwhelming. And I don't get it. I don't understand it. I don't see how. I mean, this time last season we were really buzzing because the squad was in a good place. We're in the Champions League automatically, and we all did fancy the treble. We did think that that was a real possibility, and we came with a penalty shootout of winning it. But this season, I'm getting into it. We'll probably get to predictions soon, and my prediction's totally different this season for how I think it'll go, based on a lot of different things. I've always said that I think football's about moments, even off the pitch. For example, us being laughed at by go-ahead egos, not Barcelona, no Real Madrid, go-ahead egos, because we're so stupid with the bid we've put in, a disrespectful bid. And then the same night it comes out, Rangers have identified a target for go-ahead Eagles and have went and spent 5 million on them or whatever it's going to be. Things like that really starts winding up our fans because it makes them look more competent than us. And look, I don't know enough about the new guys at Rangers, but if I'm them, I'm looking at our board and going, I really fancy a crack at yous. Because if you either watch from afar and the way we do our business at times, it's slow. And when we've been in major positions of strength, our board have been very good at letting Rangers back in. Rangers haven't always taken the opportunity, but our board have opened the door for them. They've done it when they brought Lennon in 2019. They done it again when Rodgers came back. They didn't back him, and that nearly went tits up if it wasn't for Clement kind of faulty bits just at the end of the 24 season, and obviously Rodgers got his playing. So we are good at letting them back in. But this time, I know a lot of your fans like to have spoke about them getting bust and all that. Now we know that's never going to happen because these people do have money. So now they can spend. And if I'm them, I'm looking at it and going, we can. They must think they can win the league. They must fancy it because we're weaker, I think. Tierney coming in is a good thing, I can admit that. But the fact we've still got Scales as a starting centre half is atrocious. The midfield's no any stronger. I think we're a weak midfield anyway that can't tackle. I've said that numerous times. We've still not replaced Kyogo. I don't know if the new guy Shin is going to be any good or no. For all accounts, people seem to be quite happy with him. But again, we don't really know. Ida hasn't really done it, as we've known. And then we're getting into the first game of the season, which will be a difficult game, I think, against St Mirren. And our wingers are, I think, Negren, Maida, Forrest, Tillio, Yang. There was talk of Yang leaving, talk of Tillio leaving. Forrest isn't very good, let's be honest. So it's so poorly prepared. And then you heard Rodgers saying, "Oh, we've still got a month left of the window." But that's fine. But you've got to go to Pittodrie, Ibrox, Champions League qualifier, play St Mirren. I'm not sure who the other game is before that. So be points behind and knocked out of Europe. So the whole waiting, or we need to wait until the end of the window, I just don't buy it. I don't believe a word they say about it. I think it's an insult to the fans. You don't see the fans going, look, things are a bit tight season ticket wise. We're not going to commit yet until we see who you sign. Can we just wait to September before we renew? That's not how it works. We pile our money in right away. And I just don't understand it. I feel as though if ever there was a time to act competently and back the manager, this was it, when it looks like Rangers are really going to strengthen. But again, it's just amateur hour. As I say, if it was up to me, Michael Nicholson would be sacked tomorrow. Peter Lawwell would be removed, the chairman, and probably any other board members would be removed as well, and I would totally change the football operations. I know it's never going to happen, and people will probably come back with different retorts to that, but it's just so stale, and it's the same stuff, and it's the same kind of thing, and Rangers haven't managed to take advantage of it for a while, but when we've made mistakes before, eventually they did capitalise, like when we brought back Neil Lennon, which was just madness. So for me, I don't know where Rodgers is in all this. I think he probably wants to leave Celtic with all the fans, or 99% of the fans going, oh, thanks for coming back, you've been a great manager, and he rebuilds his reputation, and that's maybe why he's not just walked away. But there's no way he can be happy with this. I mean, he's a proper manager. He's worked at good clubs like Liverpool, Leicester, and now he's been hung out to dry by these board members and the CEO. So, irrespective if he's signing a new deal or no, surely you back him. You don't just go, well, we're just going to no back him and just hopefully just fall over the line with the title and then replace him. It just doesn't seem to be a good strategy. So, for me, but it just feels like deja vu. I feel as though I've had this conversation about the same people doing the same stupid things year after year at the club, and I've got a bad feeling about the season. I don't know if you want a prediction or no, but as it stands, I don't think Celtic will win the title. I know that sounds, people are going, I've not even kicked a ball and you've not seen anything really play out. I just feel like it's starting to look like it's written in the stars for the Americans to come in and show up our stupid board within a season. There's a real feeling this could be their Ange 21-22 season. And as I've said before, I don't fear anything Rangers do, but the Celtic board terrify me.
No, I agree with a lot of what you say there. Danny, I'll come at you. Last season, it seemed maybe I was just fickle and believed it, but it seemed like there was a bit of a shift in the way we done our business. We spent good money on the likes of Adam Ida, Paolo Bernardo, Austin Trusty, and even broke our own transfer record on Arnie Engels. Now, 12 months later, we seem scared to splash any sort of cash, as Tony said. It's not just one or two sort of transfers that we're getting bids rejected for. It seems to be every single one. We're linked with the boy from Antwerp for feels like the last 3 years. Same as we were with Kvistgaard, as Tony mentioned, there's reports from the Dutch press that we're generally becoming a laughing stock because the bids we're submitting. I think for the Go Ahead Eagles boy, where our first bid was 1.5 million, we get told they wanted 6.5, and then apparently we went back with 1.75 and then 3 million. It's just, what is going on? Like, I'll be honest, I agree with Tony. I don't think we have a strategy. I don't think the people running our sort of transfer dealings are qualified to do it. I don't think Nicholson and Chris Mackay and others that are probably the ones handling these sort of negotiations, I don't really think they have a clue what they're doing. And I'll be honest, Danny, I don't know if you would agree, but I think it comes down to, I think they feel they get made a bit of an arsey last year by having to overpay for the likes of Adam Ida. Engels hasn't been the massive success they'd hoped, so I think they're scared to spend the money. We're forever telling the AGM shareholders how cash rich we are and how well run we are, but we seem feared to spend any of that to sort of speculate, to accumulate.
Do you know, you're probably right, but look at Ida and Engels. Celtic are still going to make a massive profit, having spent the money on they two, whether they've been any good or no. Celtic aren't going to lose out on that. We're still going to post a profit thanks to a good performance in Europe and all the revenue that brought in. What about this Paul Tisdale guy that came in last year? He's meant to be a kind of go-between the board and the club, and kind of terms of like an old-fashioned operations manager or whatever it was. No heard anything from him. Sometimes, after we kind of go back and forth in the group chat, and sometimes I accuse Tony of being a bit hyperbolic and exaggerating a bit, but he's completely right. The CEO has not come out once and shown his vision for the club, and we're not asking him to be like the Notts Forest guy and come out and threaten players to stay and all that and whatever, but at least come out and you don't need to do a video or, just put an article up on the website about what your hopes are for the club, because at the end of the day, it should be him that's driving the club. You're just not getting it, and I think the board just seem to be happy to let Rodgers come out and kind of face it on, but Rodgers is, let's be honest, the guy's got a massive ego. He's thrown back cryptic digs at the board and not so cryptic digs at the board, and then before you know it, there's certain Celtic websites that have got articles going on about how, bad-mouthing Rodgers and making out Rodgers is this and Rodgers is that, and you get this proxy war that comes out where really we're stuck in the middle of it, and it shouldn't be the case. It's just, even what you said last year, look at Ida, that dragged on and dragged on. Bernardo dragged on and dragged on. Are you telling me Luke McCowan wasn't available for £1 million in July, but suddenly he was at the end of August? Just stupid. Like, Engels I can understand, because that played out and there was a lot of moving parts in that. Celtic, obviously, if you're going to break your transfer record, you need to make sure you're doing it right, and obviously the contract and that had to be right for both sides. I can understand that taking a while, but Ida and Bernardo, big part of winning the league and the cup double. Obviously Ida scored after Bernardo shot in the cup final. They two should have been wrapped up on the Monday after the cup final. They two deals should have been done that week. Players know that they're coming back to Celtic, but then you've got Ida turning up playing for Norwich in friendlies, and then he comes up, he's no fit. He's like, takes him a while to get going, and then before you know it, you're kind of writing off the season, but you're writing off large parts of it because you're like, well, he's no fit. So even things like that, I didn't. Do you know what? I remember it at the time, but it just hit back on me how bad the window was 2 years ago. When you look at when you brought in Rodgers the first season, right? Dembele, there's talk Dembele was already done, but you bring in Toure, was it Gamboa and Sinclair? Right, Gamboa didn't really work out, but Toure, for what he was for that first couple of months of the season, was exactly what we needed, and Sinclair was brilliant. And so you don't need to spend hundreds of money or sign 12 players, but you're filling the squad with proper players. That first transfer window was a disgrace. Genuine, when you think back on it, and Tony's right, they're probably all failures and the jury's out on Yang, but it's not going to lean in his favour. If you were to make a decision about Yang the new, barring the fact that we need wingers, you'd probably let him go. And it's just, they don't seem to have a plan. It's like every summer the same thing keeps happening. And like Tony, I made a few notes as well, and it's just like, I thought the whole thing last year was they'd spent the money because we got out the window and then we beat Rangers a couple of days later, and everybody's going about how successful it was, and we went on and played well in Europe. It was great, but the manager should have had most of that squad for the first league game of the season, and yet he didn't. And we played quite well in pre-season last year, which kind of masked it a wee bit. But then Sinisolo, sorry, that's what I meant to bring up. Like, you bring him in, he looks like he's got to be one for the future, and that's been quite good. But we don't see that in any other. You don't see it happening again. You don't see it. We don't sign like a big player like Schmeichel. He was a free agent, but it was a good signing. And then you bring somebody else in. They seem to like. Sometimes you think they turn the corner, and then they remind you that they've no, and then they maybe just get lucky at a certain point. And like the board, I think in the whole the board they've done a good job. You don't have that much money in the bank without doing something right. Do you know what I mean? They've obviously got it right somewhere along the line. But I think the turning point's past now, and I think the hoarding is back. And I've tried to kind of make a good metaphor for it, but it's kind of like Arsene Wenger at Arsenal, where he was great for years, and then it got to the point where he'd stayed far too long, and the proper, real, visceral hatred towards him. And then when you look back, well, he actually stayed 13 years after he won his last league title. And you think, so he'd done a great job for so long, but how long, is too long? And do you start hurting? And I think the board are starting to hurt the club. And I think they've been doing it for a few years. Last year they got a wee bit lucky with the way things worked out, but fair play to them. They put their hand in their pocket. We broke a transfer record. We signed a boy. I think we broke it twice last summer. But you're not even asking them to do that again this year. It's been obvious since Johnson missed that penalty. It's been obvious that we need a winger. That's been made even more obvious because we've lost Kuhn. We've been needing a defender for years. You go and sell two, alright, they were bit part players. Lagabert was away on loan, the Rocky couldn't really get in the team. Rodgers doesn't seem to trusty, pardon the pun. We're stuck with Scales again, who's not good enough, he's not got it. So you're needing a centre half. Maybe they thought Taylor would stay about and play second fiddle to Tierney. Obviously he's away. They look as if they've got the boy in Amura looks half decent foot. I've not seen anything apart from a couple of clips online because I don't really watch pre-season, but he looks like he might be a good backup to Tierney. But they're screaming out, like where we're screaming out for players, we're still screaming out for him. You could argue that we need a striker. Well, everybody would say we need a striker. If Rodgers was to come out and say, look, we spent 9 million in Ida, he's the man, I could get behind that for a while until Ida probably proves that he's not got it. But there just doesn't seem to be any. The word was strategy was used, but it seems to be right. It's just they don't seem to learn any lessons for the year before. And every time you look at there's news about Celtic this summer, it's bad news. It's always like, oh, we've been fucked at. We're getting laughed at by Dutch teams trying to sign their players. And I never try and compare what we're doing to what they're doing. I just let them get on with it. But when you see us acting like that, all you're doing is handing encouragement over the road. And momentum's a big thing in football. You can see what happens when it goes against you. We've seen it happen in the not so recent history. I just don't know why they seem to be happy for it to happen. I just can't explain it. And you look there, anytime you read a report on Celtic now, it's always like, oh, they've asked for a tenner and we've offered £2. But yeah, when it goes the other way, they fought to get that money for O'Reilly, but they seem offended that other teams want proper money for their players. And it's the same old problem as they think they're too clever. They think, oh, well, they think he's worth 10 million, we'll get him for 2 and then sell him for 30. It's just that somebody was going on. I seen it today. Sorry, I've rabbited on. I'll give you the mic back in a minute. But I seen it today. People were talking about Gary. It was yesterday. It was 15 years since Gary Hooper signed, and somebody put up the thing saying, "Oh, 2.5 million signing for Scunthorpe." The fans would be raging if this happened today. But we're still trying to make these signings 15 years later. Everybody in Fitbizz moved on, and we don't need to go out and spend 100 million every summer, or we don't need to go daft. But the times, they £2.5 million players are now costing 7 and 8 million. Yet we still seem to be obsessed with this, like, caring. I mean, we only get Nygren in because he's out of contract in a couple of months. That's the only reason we got him for 2 million. And where does it come a point where they actually go, fuck right, we better wise up here and start acting like a proper club? Because they're just, I mean, it's all, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's probably paper talk, right? But see hearing that some Dutch mob have laughed out your bid for their player, like, and everybody's gloating about it, like, if they get any shape, like, fucking, and you're heading into the game at the weekend, and it looks like, Yang's going to be a first choice winger, Scales is going to play at centre half, and there's a good chance Forrest, if we're struggling for a goal, will be hooked off the bench to try and get us a goal. And it's just not good enough. And at some point the manager's got to come in and take a bit of responsibility for it as well, because I don't think he's blameless in this, but he must be pulling his hair out as well, thinking what the fuck's going on here. Like, every time he asks for a player, they come back and say, oh no, we can't afford them, and then 2 days later you find out they've tried to buy him for fucking 8% of what he's worth. And I still believe in Rodgers. I still believe in the team. I think starting 11 wise will be fine. I take Rodgers' ability to coach a group of players over anybody's, but you're only a couple of injuries away from proper crisis mode, and you're a couple of bad results away from crisis mode as well. So we should be heading into season excited and looking forward to. I actually think it's a good thing that they've been bought over and they're getting into the season with a bit of steam. We should be up for that challenge, but it seems to be that we just think nothing's happened, and who knows, they might get called if they're not careful.
Absolutely, and I think I was seeing, just you talking about things that happened on, like, years ago, you're talking about Hooper, I think I was reading it was 6 years ago that the banner got unfurled about don't sleep at the wheel, and it feels like we've had some great times since then, one terrible season, but it still feels like we're in that position where, I think you're quite right, Danny, I think it's fair to say that on this bit we're constantly reminded by opposition supporters that it's over 20 years since we've won a knockout tie in the latter stages of a European competition, so I just don't know who these people are accountable to. Like, it appears nobody, and it appears that they're happy to turn the profit, increase the price of season tickets, release 25 kits this fucking season, it feels like, a new bit of training gear every week, charge you full whack for...
I came back in there, damn silly. See the new away tap they've brought out? That's a screamer, right? And obviously it's a throwback to the one they brought out in 98, right? But that tap get worn in 98, 99 and 2000. I think that's seen 3 different Celtic managers. I think it was Venglos, Barnes and O'Neill. I think all their teams wore that tap. And now we are charging folk 75, 80 quid. You're out 120 quid if you want the full tap. God forbid you want somebody's name in the back of it. And these are taps that we wear once a season away to Hibs or away to St Mirren, and then you don't see them again. It's like, when's enough going to be enough for these people?
No, I think you're right. As I say, I think we're probably ran brilliantly as a PLC, but fucking horrifically as a football club. Andy, I'll bring you in. I know you've been waiting patiently. What's your sort of thoughts on it? And a couple of them I've mentioned about how possibly complicit maybe isn't the right word, but how much do you hold Rodgers to account as well? I'm sure he would like to spend more, but when he is out sort of supporting what the board's doing and talking about his good relationships and saying how he'll be happy as long as we get our business done by the end of the transfer window, he has to be taking at face value that he's happy with the way that's gone, because as I think Tony mentioned, or Danny, one of them says, we've got Pataudry and Ibrox in the first 4 set of league games, plus we've got a vital Champions League qualifier. We could have a lot of damage done to us in that sort of spell, and if Rodgers then in the first or second week of September says, I don't feel like we done as well as we could in the transfer window, I know a lot of supporters, myself included, we're all pretty big fans of Rodgers, but nobody will take what he's saying if he comes out and sends coded messages about how shit the transfer window is in the middle of September. I think he needs to be demanding it now from the board. I don't know about you.
I agree with what a lot's been said by all threes, and I think that he should be, and he should be holding it to account, and he should be stronger in his word. That he likes to be clever, and he likes to sort of infer certain things and whatever else, but Rodgers should be stronger in his words, and he should be almost forcing the board's hand, saying, "I were expecting movement." Do you know what I mean? Try to say there, like he should be trying to force their hand with that, and he should be stronger in his language and his no. And I do agree that he's not entirely blameless if it goes on like this, because he's been through it before. He's seen what happened before. It was obviously part of the reason as to why he left before, because he felt he took us as far as he was allowed to take us. If that's what's happened again and happening again, then he's accountable for that, because it's all right leaving and then sort of bringing all that out and wanting to talk about all that, but ultimately, if you're not willing to say it when fans have obviously welcomed you back in, we've had great success, we're all wanting to kick on, if you're not willing to say it now, then it's just not worth a fuck. With the boys, I don't want to cover all the ground again, but you know what it's like. Sometimes you just get ranting, and there's a lot to rant about with the way we're ran at the minute. But I think so much as being said is absolutely spot on. And even if Adam Mead is over right now, I mean, you've got certain people who will never criticise Celtic, they'll never criticise Celtic a day in their life, and I'm not going to go over this ground again, but all they care about is we're better than Rangers, and that's it. That's as far as they want to go, and it doesn't matter anything else about them, so they'll never criticise Celtic because we've been winning. That's not who we're talking to, really, to be entirely honest with you, and that's not who these discussions are about. It's about the people who've seen this movie before and know what's happening and know how this can end. Because ultimately we just want the best for the club, we want the best team on the park, and we want to feel valued as supporters, which isn't happening, quite frankly. But the one that people like to point to now is Adam Ida. Oh, we paid 9 million. We shouldn't have paid that, and blah blah blah. But Chief MD really wants to have a discussion about how that happened, the chain of events that led to that. It's the board's mismanagement that allowed that to happen, because we were left in a transfer window fucking scrambling about at the last minute to pull in a striker. We pull in Adam Ida on loan, fucking miss putting any form of option to buy in that agreement, and then we're left with Norwich have got us out of a barrel, because again we've put ourselves in the position of he scored some important goals in that year on loan. Rodgers has started to really like him, obviously wanted him in, and Norwich can name their price for him. But that, through board mismanagement, that's happened. That's what allowed us to get to that position. So paying 9 million from, we've got nobody to blame but ourselves. That was us that done that. Whereas if we wanted him, again, I think Tony said it earlier about, or somebody said it earlier about Luke McCowan. If he was available for 1 million at the end of the window, he was available for 1 million at the start of the window. And that's spot on for the vast majority of signings, particularly signings that we make in the markets that we are shopping in. More often than not, that is the case. And consistently, we've put ourselves in that position where we're scrambling. And we've said it before, time and time and time again, that there's so many clubs and good examples of clubs out there who operate in a far better fashion than us, because they're prepared for when their good players leave. They're prepared, and their goal is what our goal should be is, can we leave the transfer window stronger than we entered it? And it's consistently no for us, and it shouldn't be the case. We should have targets identified, and we need to stop pissing about thinking we can fling these stupid offers at clubs and think they're going to be desperate for the cash, because it's clearly not the case. And you're getting to the point now, and it's been said a million times, is that teams aren't going to want to deal with us anymore, because why the fuck would you? What would be the point? If Celtic are willing to pay, aren't they willing to pay X amount, somebody else will. Like Danny's spot on with the Negrin deal. Like, if he was under contract for a couple of years, they'd have been asking for 6, 7, whatever, and they would have laughed us out, because we wouldn't have been serious about trying to make that deal happen. That's only happened because his contract was running out. But we're putting ourselves in a position where teams are just not going to bother engaging with us, because what's the fucking point? And then we're going to get the same thing happening with us, where teams will just say, all right, what's that, you want 30? There's 7. Like, that's the sort of place that you end up in, because you've got people running the club who, quite frankly, are fucking moronic. They've got no idea how to run a model in this club, in this environment, and it's not. And as you touched on yourself there, Dan, like, it's not just transfer dealings; it's everything. everything about the club has been stripped back to make the maximum amount of money and keep the profits as high. And that probably comes down to the fact that it is a PLC, it is a business, and these guys' bonuses and how well they're done is how good the balance sheet looks at the end of the season. That's all this comes across as. That's why Newcastle game they're charging stupid money after putting everybody's season tickets off. That's why we get less value for money now. Year on year, season ticket prices go up, the amount of games we get into go down. Even the people who pay for Celtic TV, the coverage in that is a fucking disgrace for anybody who was watching any of the friendlies at any point. An absolute disgrace for the money that they want to have people for that. The amount of taps they want to bring out and fleece people for money, the amount of shite they bring out in that show, the prices, everything in there. But people consistently buy it because they know the emotional attachment that people have got to the club. People don't want to miss anything. People want to constantly be invested. But every single year, people don't get their value for money. Then it's constant. And now the worry is, that's all right when you're playing against incompetence. That's all right when you're playing against teams who'll beat themselves. And that's what's happened. What's going to happen now when somebody puts a proper challenge into you and you've no properly equipped yourself to deal with that? It's all right. And even now we're getting to that stage again where we're going to need to start playing qualifiers, even if you win the league, to get into the Champions League. And obviously, the amount of money that brings and whatever else, like, you're putting yourself in a position now where you risk all that and you take so many steps back and end up fucking, I don't know, playing away in fucking Rubin Kazan in the Europa League, fucking begging to get through with the skin of your teeth. Like, that's where you end up if you don't properly prepare and equip yourself, and that's what we're doing. I've got no confidence now that we'll come out of this window any stronger than we've won in it. We're getting into a season again where James Forrest is going to be called upon off the bench as one of the first subs out wide, which is crazy. Like, absolutely no harm to James Forrest, but he just shouldn't be in that position. Like, we've let two centre halves go, recalled Welsh, who's some, I don't know how he just keeps finding himself in this team. Again, no harm to him, but it's just mismanagement for the very top. Left back Tierney, brilliant, but we've just now we've lost Taylor and Schlupp, who you would argue is having two of them is a stronger left back position than if Tierney gets injured. You're left with Anamura, who's looked okay, but he was bought as a centre half, and Rodgers was talking about fucking loaning him out the next day. Like, you might land on your feet, but if you don't properly equip yourself, chances are you won't. And that goes right across the entire team. Like, we're now throwing ourselves into debates about Almeida's going to have to start through the middle because there's so many people just don't trust either, particularly trust him himself to go and do that. So you're then putting arguably your best winger in his strongest area through the middle of the park, which again is fucking nuts. Like, Tillio was other side of the world, nobody thought he would ever come back, and now again going to find himself in a team. Yang was halfway down to Norwich. Half the support was happy with it, the other half were saying, no, I don't know. Starting winger, like, that's mismanagement. There's no other way to describe it, and it's just, as I said before, Dan, like, the issue that people have got and why tensions are so high with it and why people are so angry is because we've seen this film before. I don't know how many times we've had this conversation. I don't know how many times we've been on here for the years that we've been doing this, talking about we're not prepared getting into this game. We're not equipped getting into this game. The manager has to be properly backed. What did the scouting team do all year? What did the team who deal with transfers do? Like, and it's the same shite just happening again. And again, as I say, it's all right when you've got somebody like Rodgers who is a great coach and can get the best out of players who he can get that extra 5-10% out of players who maybe no every other manager could. He can improve players. And again, you're playing teams who will just beat themselves. And you've got that quality above everybody else. But what if everybody else raises it a couple of percentages? What if your bigger rival does go and start taking it seriously and does properly equip themselves? What happens then? What happens when you go into that qualifier underprepared because you're not willing to speculate and then you lose out in that money? All that happens next is a trickle-down effect. All that happens is, again, fans are rogered. Fans are then on the receiving end of stupid prices for Europa League packages. We then fucking embarrass ourselves in that. Players don't want to come anymore because they say, why would I play in that and then go to a Champions League team? Like, it's just a trickle-down effect and it's a knock-down effect, and people can say it's jump to the extremes, but we've seen it before. It's happened before, and it's happened under the watch of a lot of people who are at the club and shouldn't be at the club, and that's why we're on here no talking about how excited we are for the first game of the season. That's why we're on here talking about how we're fearing the worst, because we've seen it happen, and there's every single chance it could happen again.
Aye, it does feel pretty reminiscent of things we've went over before, and I think it's alright. As I say, I think main problem we have is that the board aren't accountable to anybody. There's no sort of accountability for their failures, and that mob across the city have probably been the only team in the world that's been run worse than us for the sort of last 4 or 5 years. And as has been mentioned by a few of them, if they get their shit together, it's not going to take much to really give us a fright. And if it coincides with us failing to back the manager and failing to have the squad as strong as it can be, then it could turn into another horrendous season. And they wouldn't be as lucky this time that the fans were locked out, because they'll get both barrels from the support. And right now I think a bit of the problem is that I think we have supporters who would take bullets for these millionaires and billionaires that are running us and can't see by them, but it won't take much for that to change. And I feel like, as I say, we wanted to come on here and do a season preview and be all optimistic, look to build on Champions League and yada yada, but as I say, I think there's a real feeling of not quite inevitability yet, but it feels like we are on the brink of being blindsided. Well, no, I think a lot of supporters are aware what might happen, but it appears the board could be blindsided about what might happen if we don't get our shit together. And I just, as I say, I don't think we have a strategy. Like, last night's rumour was that we're linked with some Man City centre-half who's, I think, is 18 or 19, and by all accounts has played really well in Premier League 2, and I think played a couple of Champions League games towards the end for them. But it was about 10 years ago that we were going to Man City for loans with the likes of Boyata, Denier, Guidetti. What, have we just gone back down that line where that's new the strategy again? What next are we going to fucking get Dahan on the phone and see who he's got available as? I just don't know what our sort of plan is. Like, it's the whole summer all I've heard is, in terms of the centre-half position, is Brendan Rodgers talking up Dane Murray, and then less than a week before the the league starts, we get linked to a Man City centre-half who I'm pretty sure Man City will only be sending to us if they're expected to play, which then would probably see Dane Murray out the equation for getting games with us. And that's another episode we could go on. It's about the state of our youth sort of set up and the lack of quality come through it. Is like Chris McCart's been running it for a long time, and yet the academy players that are going to play the most this season will be like Sir Alston, Tierney and McGregor's over 30 and the other two are in their mid to late 20s, so it's just no yielding any sort of product from it. But yet again, who's Chris McCart accountable to? Because we're probably about a good, Tierney's probably the last one that really burst onto the scene and took his chance and obviously got us a massive transfer fee, and now he's back. It feels like we've said it often enough that the club's run more like a bowling club than a football club. And look, hopefully, I say hopefully, that's the problem. There's no rumours of substance saying, Celtic, this player's coming in for medical on Tuesday. They're at late stage negotiations with this one, and that would be alright if every signing we made was sort of out of the blue and you just sort of woke up to it and you could say, aye, nothing gets out. But the problem is that our transfers are more or less projected out over weeks and months, and it happened last summer and we broke a transfer record, but it's happening again this summer, and I just don't know what we're going to do. We've took in about 18 million quid and spent about 2 million of it. When Nicholas Kuhn, we were quite happy to let him go. As one of you mentioned, we didn't say, we're keeping hold of him until a qualifier or until we've got suitable replacements in. The suitable replacements at this point are Marco Tilio and Yang, who maybe Yang, he's one that's on the fence, but Marco Tilio, certainly there was exclusive deals getting leaked about his move to Vienna, and I think Rodgers would probably, I think he would sell Yang as well if he had better to come in. And I know he said the other day that there's no way Yang can leave the now because he's considered a starter, which I think is pretty descriptive of where the squad is. If Yang's seen as a starter and they harm to him, I know a lot of people still got hope for him, but I think in a couple of big games last season he showed that he maybe doesn't have it. But I'll not ramble on too much longer because I know it's been over 40 minutes we've been on this series and why we couldn't do a season review in this episode as well. But I just feel that we had to do this. It's been a few years since we've done the old sort of crisis episodes, and look, we're not quite in crisis yet, but if we didn't do this and then in 3 months' time it is a so-called crisis, then, well, we can look back on this and say, aye, you could see us coming a mile away. We had crisis in COVID season and lost qualifiers before that. We sort of felt we had to raise our concerns. That's all we're doing. We're just full supporters that are raising their own concerns. We don't speak for anybody else. We don't claim to speak for anybody else. So, aye, we'll be back later in the week, hopefully with some signings that have come out of the blue as we'll do a full season preview, look at what we're expecting domestically and in the European campaign. Obviously, Tony's gave a wee hint to how confident he is overall, but we'll all get together again and get that out to you as quick as we can. Obviously, season is fast approaching, so give us a wee shout on social media with your predictions for the season, or just even your concerns about this transfer window, or maybe you're happy with it, maybe you're confident in the squad and the players that are there, but we'd love to hear what yous are thinking. Aye, just search for Full Times the Podcast wherever you get your social media. Thanks for taking the time to listen, we do appreciate it, and I know it's a longer episode today, so we do appreciate you taking the time to listen to it. We'll be back later in the week with our season preview and a wee look towards that St Mirren game as well, but aye, catch you then. Hail hail.